familiar with as a pop-up idea, but to actually use it as a voting. I was just wondering if there is another way besides voting this could be used as just a way to get opinions. I couldn't think of, the answer is yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Terrific. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Council Vice President, and members of the committee. My name is Corey Schroeder, and I'm currently an urban scholar at the state of Minnesota for the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And I would like to introduce you to our amazing project team, Shanice Watts, who is with Public Works here at the City of Minneapolis, Ariana Reed with CPED here at the City of Minneapolis, and Mary Bustos, who is in professional development at Minneapolis Public Schools. And as you can see, we are presenting on outreach through elementary age students. And the idea we are most excited and eager to share with you is the design of an election bee that would take place throughout the elementary schools in Minneapolis. So think spelling bee, but elections. The idea behind this is to go beyond the simple kind of voting for president activities you may have done in elementary school or middle school, and to really highlight other important offices such as judges, commissioners, city council members, and state senators. And our hope is that not only will parents become more educated with voting through this, but also that youth will learn about the elected positions they can serve in and as they grow older. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm wondering, I'm familiar with the curriculum at Kids Voting Minneapolis. Was that the basis of either of these that are associated with the schools, that other group as well as yours? Do you look at that? I mean, there's curriculum built into that. It's kind of a year-round kind of curriculum. Is that, what would you see the election be? How is that different than their curriculum?
I don't know if we've looked too much into that in our project, but I think it's something that could be kind of condensed with it. I know there's already the district-wide spelling bee, I believe, and kind of incorporating that same model, and then having the winners of each school or precinct or however you want to do it at the polling stations, and that look at their parents out to say, oh, I got to see my kid at the polling station. Yeah, they like take some pictures, whatever. Maybe Instagram them, but so if that answers your question.
I think it does. Thanks very much, Councilmember Yang.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say that I think this is a fantastic idea, for elementary age students to understand what the plain language charter is and anything like that. That'd be fantastic.
Well, if they could figure it out, I'd like to know something too. I got it, Councilmember Yang. I liked it a lot. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice President of the committee. My name is Daniel Cobway. I work with the state of Minnesota with the Department of Labor. Here with me, I have my group members, Yusuf Halajibi. He works with the city of Minneapolis in the finance department, and Paida Chikate. She works at the Department of Human Services with the state of Minnesota. And the recommendation that we are going to share with you today was around a newsletter we were going to create that the city would send out to new graduates from the public schools, and the public schools, of course, would have information on their email addresses, and that would be sent out to the students, and that would provide them information on why voting is important, how to register to vote, and some bios about who's running in their districts, their city council member from their precinct, and any information on if it's a president or vice president or whoever else is running. So yeah, that is our recommendation. So
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These emails that come from the city, with regards to your recommendation, I mean, how do we make it cool so that people just don't click delete? Because I would tell you, most folks would just click delete really easily. And so, how do you do it so that, it's interesting, cool, good enough for people to spend 2 seconds on? Because most of the times you'd be lucky if people spend a second on it. So how do we do that?
That's hard because a lot of people do just kind of go through their emails. I don't know exactly. I think we can, personally, like if I got an email and I was a student and it was from, my school or the public schools or whatever, like I'm sure gonna open it, because it's like for me it's an important thing, So I mean, if I was a student, I would personally open it.
But if you got an email from the city of Minneapolis, I mean, what would that do for you? I mean, you'd probably be like, I'm going to get maybe a citation. I'm going to delete it, right?
I mean, I would hope that they're not going to be emailing out their citations.
Good thought.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think if it was hopefully from the city, again, I don't know, it's the government. I'm going to open it. I don't know. I don't, typically I'm not going to
Good answer.
I'm not going to get an email from the government typically. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's money, who knows what it is.
Yeah, we send money out all the time. I think personalization is the first really big thing, is have their name in the subject line and a welcome from somebody. I think that would be really make it a personal message, make it much more attractive to open. Alma-san.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, something that is a common misperception out in the public sphere is that when we get your email address, we put it into everything. And one of the difficulties we've had with Youth Coordinating Board in coordinating social services between the county, the city, and the state is the fact that we don't, and in fact we can't, share personal information. Has your group looked at, is it permissible, do you know, for the city to get email addresses from Minneapolis Public Schools, or would it be something that perhaps we would provide the newsletter to Minneapolis Public Schools for them to send out?
Yeah, because that was a limitation we were thinking about is, does the city even have information on people's emails? Because originally something we were thinking about was sending out actual physical mailers to families, but that's of course a lot more expensive than just doing something digitally. So yeah, I don't know exactly like if it's legal that we have that sort of personal information, but I think in that case it would be as effective for Minneapolis schools to send it out to their students because that's their information. So
Very good. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Council Vice President, and members of the committee. My name is Jasmine Logan. I'm a current urban scholar with the City of Minneapolis in the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. I'd like to start off by first introducing our project team, Igadosa Obeide. He works with the City of Minneapolis in the Human Resources Department. Juan She, who works with the State of Minnesota in the Department of Management and Budget, and Ramal Piwi, who works with the State of Minnesota in the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and regrets that she cannot be here with us today. Today we are presenting our project focused on increasing voter registration among college students living in on-campus housing. This demographic typically has lower voter turnout and higher numbers of people registering to vote the same day of an election. So our recommendation is that the City of Minneapolis creates a short 30-second video segment which would be displayed in the residence halls of the surrounding colleges and universities, as well in public student spaces such as student centers and or unions. The segment would include information on the benefits of pre-registering to vote, as well as information on how the student can learn more about the process and eventually register to vote. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Terrific. Thank you. Not seeing any direct questions, but I was wondering, what is the population? How many people are living in dorms that this would reach?
Well, right now with what our project plan was, it's specifically focused on the University of Minnesota, Augsburg College, and North Central University. And within that, counting graduate students at the U of M, I think we're looking at about anywhere from 60 to 70,000 students. But then that goes lower as we're looking just at on-campus housing. I don't have those numbers right now, but I know that at Augsburg and North Central specifically, the students living in on-campus housing after their first year is a greater percentage than the University of Minnesota students, if that follows. So it's a significant portion of students, especially if we're talking about first-year incoming college students who are going to be registering. It's a really high percentage.
Terrific. I was wondering if you've used any data that we have available, how many same-day registrations were there at those precincts that those would be most impacted by,
Mm-hmm.
and that could give us a better idea.
Yeah.
Because that's what takes up the most time at a polling place. If you want to get out of an hour-and-a-half line, be pre-registered or have everybody else. So that would really be really improve the voter experience at the precincts if we could change that. So thank you for that idea and bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Cassidy.
Chair Quincy, Vice President Glidden, and committee members, thank you so much for making the accommodations to allow the urban scholars of this year to come and present. It meant a lot to them. It means a lot to our program, and I know that it will be good for the clerk's offices. They're putting forward some of these recommendations this year into the future. So we are so pleased that you were able to hear about some of our recommendations. The scholars will be taking your questions, making sure that their reports and their plans have some of those final answers and or address some of your concerns. They will be making final presentations to Casey and his team on Wednesday while you all are at Committee of the Whole. Casey will be here, but his staff are going to be with us, hearing in more detail and hopefully fleshing out some of those other questions you may have. We would also like to formally invite you to attend their public recognition ceremony on August 12th, Friday, from 2 to 4 p.m. in the Minneapolis City Hall Rotunda, where we will be joined by some speakers and a short presentation followed by refreshments. So with that, thank you very much for your time.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Gardner. Council Vice President.
Thanks. I just wanted the opportunity to make maybe just a broader comment and first say thank you very much to all the urban scholars for being here. We're excited to hear what you're working on, but I'm going to kind of turn it around a little bit because really we're just excited to be able to present ourselves as public employers to you and know that we have such highly qualified, ambitious group of young people who sought to spend your time over an entire summer learning more about what does it mean to work for the state of Minnesota or the Minneapolis Public Schools or the city of Minneapolis. And I know there is probably some sort of feedback loop that goes back to you, but I hope you really take that seriously because we want to know that we are providing to you a quality experience so you can really understand what does it mean, and I'll just in my words, to work at a place that maybe to folks who haven't had as much contact with government seems like, it's government, it's the bureaucracy, and there is some of that, but it is also an amazing creative place where you can see ideas come to fruition. Maybe they sometimes take a little longer to come to fruition than you wish that they would, but it can happen. And it can have like a huge impact on people's lives. And so we really are proud and thankful that you have chosen to spend time with us. I know I had the opportunity to hear a little bit about Guled's work with the Intergovernmental Relations Department. And that's just one example where I know that those department staff were just very thankful for the work that he provided to them. And I know that those sentiments are repeated all across the enterprise. And so thank you to you. And I hope that we are going to see some of your faces here at the city in some coming years. So thank you.
Well, great. Thank you again for everybody's presentations. Thank you, Ms. Gardner, for your work. Mr. Brink Johnson, it's nice to see your face again. There's always chance for employment. You can. And then Ms. Rice, thank you for your work. And Mr. Carl, it looks like your department, particularly Ms. Wackelhovitz, with the elections, Ms. Hollingshed, fabulous job. Thank you so much. You guys got a great deal. There's a lot of very actionable ideas from the elections office from this work. So thank you very much for what you've done. I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the other organizations besides the city of Minneapolis, the state of Minnesota, Minneapolis Public Schools, Minneapolis Parks and Recreation, Hennepin County, and Greater Twin Cities United Way. For without them, there would be no you. They were your hosts and funded that, so it's important to our city. So thank you again very much for your efforts, for your participation, and we wish you well. Thank you so much. So good. As we begin, I do want to thank Councilmember Goodman and Councilmember Fry for joining the committee, but we can begin the rest of this agenda today. I'm looking through, let's see, we have pretty full agenda, 30 items on our agenda today. I'm going to begin with the consent agenda and ask council members if they'd like to have any additional questions or to pull any comments on these items. From the city attorney's office, there's a claim for Mr. Ahmed, claim for Mr. Mohammed, claim for Mr. Young, Ms. Plant, and Mr. Rahman. The Communications Department brings forward a gift acceptance from Clear Channel Outdoor for display time. Finance Property Services has a distracted driving policy, motorized vehicle and equipment control policy, accepting low bids for Everett for the Hamilton School renovation project. And I'd like to just make a note on that. I'd like to pull that for a little conversation. And then the Hamilton School facility renovation project. Impound Lot Improvement Project. And the Information Technology Department brings forward the contract amendment with KDV Technology and Consulting. The Police Department brings forward an acceptance of a grant from $13,000 for Target Corporation Community Engagement Programming. From the Executive Committee, we have the collective bargaining agreement with Public Work Engineers Unit, collective bargaining agreement with Stagehands Unit, and Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee brings forward a State of Minnesota Master Grant Contract for employment and training related services. We have the grant acceptance from DEED for Metropolitan, as well as the Metropolitan Council Tax-Based Revitalization Account for Spring Brownfield Grant Round. Homeownership Opportunity Minneapolis, this is a vacant housing recycling program, guidelines and contract. We have the applications for Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development Redevelopment Grant Program, city loan and grant to Hennepin Theater Trust for the acquisition and renovation of the Solera building. From the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee, we have the revised Community Participation Program guidelines and the 2017 through 19 program allocations. From Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee, we have a grant acceptance from FEMA for a fire ground survival training program, travel expense donation acceptance from Minneapolis, Police Executive Research Forum, the contract with Veristam for commercial off-the-shelf law enforcement records management system, contract amendment with SMG for perimeter security at U.S. Bank Stadium. Transportation and Public Works Committee bring forward the LaSalle Avenue Street Reconstruction Project Assessment cancellation of how many properties? It's for $11,954 of the property located at 1012 LaSalle Avenue. We also have the 9th Street resurfacing project assessment cancellation for a property at LaSalle. Downtown Pedestrian Improvement Project is the capital budget appropriations and bid. We also have the bid for vertical transportation maintenance services and a bid for stormwater sewer cleaning. I would take, are there any questions or comments on any of these items? Councilmember Yang.
Mr. Chair, for item number 8, I'm wondering if staff is there or is here for that. I just have a simple question with regards to approving this distracted driving policy. Wondering what the consequences are if somebody violates that.
Sure. I think there is staff available. We'll pull that for a little comment afterwards. We'll pull that. Sure. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions about the funding for item number 25, and I believe there's people here to be able to answer those questions.
Okay. Let's take that. So we're going to take 25 and 8. Any other questions or comments? I would like to just have everybody take a look at the 2 items related to Hamilton School renovation project. And one's a bid and one's construction. I don't have any particular issues with it, except that there's been some questions raised. So it's something I'd like to move forward without recommendation. And we'll have some of those questions answered with our Property Services Division, who's not available right now. So that'll be fine. We'll deal with that on Friday, but I just wanted to forward that. I'd like to move the balance of the consent agenda for approval, except for the 2 items on Hamilton School being without recommendation, and then we'll get back to the other 2 items. So all those in favor of those consent items as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Those items go forward. And let's deal with number 8 first, if we could. Ms. Velasco-Thompson, could you join us on the distracted driving policy? And Councilmember Yang, would you like to readdress your question and see how we can?
Sure, Mr. Chair. With regards to this adoption of this distracted driving policy, my question is just, what are the consequences for a first violation and so on?
Council Chair and the rest of the council members, my name is Ellen Velasco-Thompson from Risk Management and Claims and Finance. To answer your question, Councilmember Yang, I have made it very, very clear in my visits with the labor management groups, all the business agents, that this particular program will not be utilized as a way for disciplinary action. That is a separate function in that each of the departments independently have set up their own systems regarding discipline for their types of drivers and a review of the accidents, as well as what is something that is preventable versus not preventable, and they will go through their union contracts on that. What we will have with this particular program is that on the first call, if it's an issue regarding, let's say, unsafe backing up, then the supervisor will sit down with the employee, they'll talk over, they will make the decision as to whether or not the employee should have 5 days, 3 to 5 days to go ahead and actually go online and take an online course to review the facts that go with safe backing up. And then it is marked and it is measured, and then it's reported back through the computer systems that that kind of incident was used as a coachable moment. So all of our stuff here is definitely in the coaching area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not seeing any other questions on that. Thank you very much. I'd like to go ahead.
There's also, I would just bring point to the committee at this time that we have a couple guests in the audience. Lisa Vicki Saunders from OSHA Consultation, who is here to support us regarding the passage of this policy. And then Lisa Kahns from the Minnesota Safety Council is also here just to support us, for your information.
Thank you very much. All right. I think that covers that. We'll move to adopt item number 8 as presented by staff. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item's carried. Thank you very much for your presence. See, Ms. Thompson, that's something we've worked on for a couple of years, so thank you for that. And the next item I believe is number 25. This is the contract with Bear Stearns. Mr. Dahl and Lieutenant Reinhardt are available for Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dahl and I spoke last week a little bit in regards to this request, and I was curious where this money was seen as coming from. This is a substantial amount of money, albeit over a long period of time, but this is something that typically during a budget cycle would have been called out, even perhaps featured as part of a budget address and in our deliberations accordingly. So in my conversations with Mr. Dahl, he helped me understand that there has been some funding through CLIC, perhaps also through capital asset CARS, and I believe he's prepared to just share with all of us kind of how this is going to be structured and funded.
Yes. Committee Chair Quincy, Vice President Glidden, committee members Otto Dahl, Chief Information Officer for the City of Minneapolis. Chair Quincy, Council Member Palmisano, there's kind of 3 areas of cost associated with the contract. One is the implementation and warranty costs. for establishing the software system and making it live for the police department and others to make use of. The second area is the ongoing maintenance and support of that software system over the course of, as configured here, for up to 12 and a half years. And then the final cost associated with the project is, in the past with the current CAPER system, the system was built by city employees, and therefore if we needed to make any changes to the software, that was done by the city internally, and there was no outlay of direct funds to accomplish that. With buying commercial off-the-shelf product, like the Versaterm product, we have to allocate funding for potential changes to the software, specifically for the various interfaces that this system does with both federal, state, and local agencies, and any other internal information systems that the city may have that actually interface with the police information management system. So what we did was we initially went out for a click request, which was $5.8 million. And that was approved. And then we also went out and are in the process of a current CARS request for 2017 for an additional $1.3 million. Now you can see from the RCA before you that the total amount of the requested contract with Versaterm is for $9.2 million. As is typical with these sorts of projects, we position ourselves to be able to support potentially the cost of all that maintenance and support going forward. So what you will find if you look at the CARS request, there's an indication of the ongoing year-over-year maintenance and support dollars that would be required over time. What specifically gets looked at in CARS and what you end up seeing from a budgetary standpoint is just the 2017 dollars, because that's the budget that's being put forth. And so that's why you're seeing just a total of $7.1 million between the CLIC and the CARS requests to date. That will get us through the implementation costs and several years of support and maintenance. And we will then look at our avenues for completing the funding necessary should we need all $9.2 million. In particular, that last category of expenses, if we need to make no changes to the software, then obviously we won't be spending that money over time. Our history has shown, though, that we will use some of that money over time. And so that is the current structure of funding relative to expected total costs of $9.2 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dahl, we have it in front of us from the RCA perspective as $9.8 million. And so just to make sure I understand you, that additional $2.7 million that isn't accounted for in the way that you've just laid it out, would that be a future CARS request, or would that be a future budgetary request, or would that come from some police department budget that we're not?
Sure, Quincy. Councilmember Palmisano. Yeah, there are multiple avenues the city could take. You could come through CARS. You could come through putting it within the IT department's rate structure itself. Traditionally, that is reserved for things that are of an enterprise nature. PIMS happens to be accessed by a number of departments, and so that's a possibility. Or the third option is that we actually come forward with some budgetary request at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, Mr. Dahl, from the aspect that it is an enterprise issue, how does Versaterm help us with some of the other kinds of data management issues as identified in for example, in our data governance audit report, one of the things that was spelled out in there that there was absolutely no money at the time was for any sort of way to help the public request and receive information that may be police information. So at the time, I specifically had focused on the records information unit and the increasing backlog there. Will Versaterm help in any way with the way that our records unit gets access to information and data requests? The police information, in other words, gets filtered in appropriate ways throughout the rest of the organization for our data needs?
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Palmisano, most definitely. This is a modern implementation of records management in the law enforcement arena. Need to recognize our current CAPER system was something that was written upwards of 30 years ago. And so even though it might have been up to date for that era, the ability for us to create a much more, if you will, object-oriented relational setup so that we can easily query and pull information as necessary. The capabilities that will be afforded police and others are significantly better than what we currently have today. So I would say that most definitely we should be able to respond more easily and deal with a better understanding of the information, because as in any project like this, police will be reviewing the data and how they structure what sort of relationships they make between the information. And I think we'll just have a much stronger information store available for the various reporting and analytic tools that can be applied against it. And so that should help with our ability to respond to anyone's request for information coming from the police information management system.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. I guess thank you very much, Mr. Dahl, Lieutenant, for being here. Ms. Green, I was wondering, I noticed on the RCA, of course, it says no additional appropriation is required, and the amount is included in the current budget. Is that in the police department budget, or is that in the overall city budget, or is it a combination of IT, MPD?
I'm actually not sure exactly where it's landed. If it was in the click portion would actually be in IT's budget, but it will be related to police. And also if there's any funding that will be funded in 2017 for cars, if it's funded, it will go into the police's budget, but then that money ultimately gets transferred into the IT's budget.
Okay, thank you. I guess the overall picture is the city has budgeted for it. Where it accounts for is not as clear. It can be a little bit fungible, but we want to make sure that we've already voted on this through the 16 budget and previous budgets as part of the CLIC process. So this isn't a surprise. No additional appropriation is required. Is that correct?
No additional appropriation is required for 16, but based on what I just heard Mr. Otto say, is that the 2017 portion we have not gone through the 2017 budget yet. So there is a gap.
Yeah, we're making some purchasing decisions in anticipation of things we haven't budgeted for, but that's called life, right? Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, to execute on this contract with Versaterm, when would we be able to actually see implementation? Meaning, this is probably a question for Lieutenant Reinhardt. When would we anticipate this being able to be available for officers and for use?
Mr. Chair, council members, and Councilmember Palmisano, we have a very aggressive implementation schedule. It's 13 to 14 months. We expect that once the contract is signed, that we will begin discussions of implementation in September of this year, and that it should be in place by October or November of next year. And that accounts for inevitable delays that we'll have. But we're going to work very aggressively to get it up and running before the Super Bowl in 2018.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Not seeing any further questions on this item. Appreciate the additional information. I'd like to move approval of item number 25 as the staff recommendation. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item carries. I believe that completes our agenda for the day, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
His response back to committee of the whole. Sorry. But since he already has, then I think we just lost track of it.
Okay.
So